Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order this regular board meeting on Monday, September 18th, 2023, of the Perrysburg Board of Education, Perrysburg Schools, a five-star school district in the state of Ohio. More to come on that. So with that start, roll call, please.
Dr. Reffert.
Here.
Mr. Pullman.
Here.
Ms. Larimer. Mrs. Eubank.
Here. Mr.
Bennington.
Here. And Ms. Larimer did say that she is on her way. So we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and we thank you for attending tonight's Board of Education meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors. You are located at 140 East Indiana. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting Perrysburg Schools. All right, first order of business is to adopt the proposed agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Moved.
Second.
Dr. Pullman, or Mr. Pullman, Dr. Reffert. And roll call, please.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Dr. Reffert.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Okay, the agenda is passed. Next item, Board of Education recognitions. We have some guests tonight. Mr. Hostler.
Thank you, and very excited to be here today. And out of the gate, we have an excellent program and excellent partners to the community. And I'll let Mr. Swartzmiller introduce our guests from the Exchange Club. So, Mr. Swartzmiller, welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to just say a few things about the CAP program, and then I'll bring in a much wiser gentleman up to the microphone to talk from an Exchange Club point of view. Since 1985, Perrysburg Schools has offered a district-wide program centering on difficult and dangerous situations, more specifically physical and sexual abuse. Previously titled SAP, for the Sexual Abuse Prevention Program, it has been a part of Perrysburg's third grade curriculum for the last 38 years. Closer examination of the materials found that the Family and Child Abuse Prevention Center calls it the Child Abuse Prevention Program, and that's why we changed the name to CAP. Our district provides this program for two reasons. One, we're complying with the state of Ohio regulations, and two, we believe that it is an important educational program for the safety of our students. CAP is a two-part problem-solving and personal safety program that helps children to recognize abusive situations and to feel comfortable in sharing their concerns with their parents and or other trusted adults. Lessons are taught in our classrooms through digital media, discussions, artwork, presentations, and role-playing. Students become aware of their family support system and their community support system. Mrs. Karen Schrock, a Perrysburg resident, has been employed by Perrysburg Schools to coordinate the CAP program this year. Mrs. Schrock's a retired teacher. She ended her career at the junior high teaching math, but before that, she was a longtime counselor at Toth Elementary School. She graduated in 1984 from BGSU with her master's degree in guidance and counseling, and a year later implemented the elementary guidance and counseling program in the Perrysburg schools.
Start all over.
Do you want me to start? No. I thought I sounded really loud, but she has participated in CAP training provided by the staff at the Children's Resource Center in Bowling Green, as well as the Family and Child Abuse Prevention Center in Toledo. Tonight, we are extremely fortunate and grateful to have our CAP efforts supported by the Exchange Club of Perrysburg. Through generous donations, the Exchange Club has provided the support needed in making this program a foundational offering for Perrysburg students. Here to represent the Exchange Club, we have Chuck Elvers and Paul Dodge. I'd like to have them come up.
Mr. Schwartzmiller, Superintendent Hostler, members of the board, we appreciate this opportunity to be here tonight. Prevention of child abuse is one of the key missions and values that the Perrysburg Exchange Club has, and also the National Exchange Club and exchange clubs around the nation. Perrysburg Exchange Club has supported the Perrysburg school system in this mission for several years, and we're proud to continue to do that and look forward to continuing that process in the future. So on behalf of all of the Perrysburg Exchange Club members and the Perrysburg Exchange Club Foundation, I would like to present you, Mr. Schwartzmiller, with a check to support financially the CAP program in the Perrysburg school system for $2,500.
Well, certainly on behalf of the board, we thank the Exchange Club and its members for the support that you're giving Perrysburg schools, not only in this program, but for all the work that you guys do in the community. It is appreciated. Always like it when the board can have such a great partnership with members of the community like this. So, thank you. Okay. We're going to dispense with the 5-minute break. I assume everybody's going to be okay with that at this point. Hold the option to do it a little bit later in the meeting.
We reserve the right.
Next, we have our first opportunity for public participation. The board welcomes public participation. This opportunity is for agenda items only, so only those items that appear on the agenda that the board will be discussing or voting on. There will be a second opportunity for public participation based off of those who have signed up already, so that opportunity will be at the end of the meeting, one of the last agenda items. So it appears we do not have anything related to agenda items, so we will move on to item 6, the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. And I'm very excited to welcome up Mrs. Albright and 2 of our students that will be assisting with the presentation on Jackets Giving Back. So as they step up, it's probably been 7 or 8 years ago that we had a group of students from the high school that said, we have this great idea about having a day where students can go out in the community and serve. And certainly that was something that was very meaningful to them, and they wanted to incorporate their classmates and the entire school. So at first pass, the idea was to have every student at Perrysburg High School do this. But having 1,700, 1,800 students leave the building, find a place to volunteer, that was a little daunting. So we said, let's focus on the senior class. So with that, we were successful in implementing that, and it has been certainly a fall event that we look forward to. So we're at that time now, and we have our committee here to help share and present. So, Ms. Albright.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexa Shine, and I'm a senior.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Williams, and I'm a junior.
So what is Jackets Giving Back? Jackets Giving Back is a student-driven volunteer day in which PHS seniors will spend their academic day volunteering throughout Perrysburg and the surrounding communities. The actual day for Jackets Giving Back is Friday, October 13th, 2023. It is the least disruptive day to students and faculty. It does not interfere with state testing. There's a football game at Springfield, and this day has historically good weather for those seniors who choose to participate outside. So why is service important? Teens learning the value of volunteerism, they understand that there is more to a community than what they experience in their daily lives. Self-esteem rises when they see that they have an impact on someone else's life. This may set off a chain reaction of regular volunteering, which enriches teens' lives even more. It exposes teens to more diversity. It improves communication and critical thinking skills while taking them out of their comfort zone, and it builds relationships with people who share the cause of helping for the community. A positive impact in the classroom. Volunteering in adolescence is associated with positive outcomes during the teen years as well as in adulthood. Volunteering is also associated with the development of greater respect for others, leadership skills, and an understanding of citizenship that can carry over into adulthood.
So this will obviously be a very big logistical undertaking. And so in regards to transportation, the district will provide transportation for 350 plus seniors to 25 plus different locations inside of Perrysburg, Maumee, Toledo, White House, etc. Bus routes will be specifically created as part of the field trip, and they will be staffed with sub-bus drivers. In regards to lunch plans, students will have the option to bring their own, or they will be provided a lunch. Other considerations, past chaperones have included senior teachers, parents, and guardians, school administrators, as well as military recruiters. T-shirts will be provided to all student volunteers and chaperones, thanks to local partner New North Window and Door. And so again, we just want to say thank you to New North Window and Door for providing a free complimentary T-shirt to everybody involved. So implementation, there were months of planning to ensure a successful event. Logistical considerations include, but are not limited to, coordinating with all participating organizations, T-shirt orders and distribution, communication with all involved, getting 350 plus students signed up, and bus routes being created. And so this year, we have a large list of participating organizations. We have a few new names like Black Swamp Conservancy, Brown Bag Food Project, Sam Cafe, Perrysburg Senior Center, as well as the Ronald McDonald House Charities. So our goals for the program, we would like to engage students in the community. We'd also like to expand our reach to new organizations in the future. We'd also like to teach students the value of volunteering in the community. And we'd like to connect the students in these organizations that are participating.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Albright, the Coordinator of Careers and Community Service Liaison for Perrysburg Schools. I have had the privilege of working with these amazing students and helping to put this program together. And so I can't be prouder of them. But we still need a little bit more help. So the last bit of the puzzle is looking for chaperones to help with this event. So we would love to welcome anyone from the board who would like to interact with our seniors and participate in this event to contact us, and we would love to have you join us.
And again, that date is
October 13th.
October 13th. Very good.
Ooh, Friday the 13th. Thanks.
We're not superstitious. It'll be great.
And I'm interested because this looks like a very heavy logistical lift. Like you said, a lot of things have to come together. When did you guys start planning for this? Last night?
So our initial start, we started probably about March of 2023. We brought the students in during the summer, and the students did a lot of outreach to the different organizations, soliciting their participation for volunteer sites.
Right.
And I know this is, we had some conflicts with work and practice schedules, so I know it's a bigger committee, but we want to thank both of you for being here and presenting.
I wanted to add, last year I had an exchange student, and this was one of the highlights of her time here at Perrysburg. She really enjoyed that day.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, we got some great feedback from the students. Students who didn't really think that they would enjoy volunteering came back saying that they really enjoyed it. So
Yeah, and I'm sure the hours probably go to the volunteer seal.
it does,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, that's wonderful.
And I know, Ms. Albright, you've been very instrumental in this, so welcome. So this
Thank
is a
you.
new experience for you. Hannah Marchetto here in the central office, who works with me closely, she's been very helpful in coordinating and kind of, connecting the students and the local agencies. And also, we know that working with the high school staff, the group did a presentation. The students had to present to the high school building leadership team. So that was probably nerve-wracking, but they did a great job to make sure the staff was bought in. And the logistic circus that has to take place, Courtney Parr is here, and Ms. Parr is our Director of Transportation, and certainly a challenge of getting these students to where they need to be in a kind of a meaningful way and back. So But there's lots of great opportunities, and excited to hear feedback on the new agencies. And we're going to talk a little bit about the state report card in a moment. And the state report card only captures one piece of what we do here in Perrysburg. And it's these kinds of programs and these kinds of connections that really make a difference and provide those lifelong lessons that often don't show up on a test, but certainly show up in life and the real world. So we're grateful for all that you two have done to help with your friends to get us here. So.
One more question I thought of. What is the volunteer commitment if somebody is interested? Is it all day? Is it a couple hours? Like, what are you guys looking for when you need volunteers?
Yeah, so typically we ask that our chaperones come to the school around 8:30 so that they can get their list of students and more information about their location. They transport themselves to the volunteer location. The students will be there till about 1:30 when the buses will come around and pick them up, and then that is the end of their commitment. They can leave from there.
So about 8:30 to 1:30.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good, well done. So October 13th, chaperones are needed. Thank you for doing this, and best of luck on that day. Have a
Thank
great
you.
school year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Mr. Hostler's superintendent report for the month of September.
All right, thanks. And I know you're not surprised, but both of these students are not only great volunteers, but they're also very involved, and they do have a lot of homework and things, so they might slip out now to work on that. So,
Wise decision.
So we want to superintendent's update for September. And one of the themes that we want to share is the lower cost, higher performance that we certainly have demonstrated as a school community. I just mentioned a little bit ago about the state report card. In October at the work session, we will have Mr. Schwartzmiller provide us with a presentation on the state report card and break it down. There's a lot of different things to kind of delve into. And first of all, we're certainly very proud of our students in the performance. We're proud of our staff for all that they've done. We know that the teachers and all the effort that goes into each school year and making sure we're doing what we need to do to achieve those results. But also we appreciate the bus drivers, food service, the secretaries, the school nurses, all the hands that go into getting our students prepared and to that classroom space, which is really important. One little factoid, out of the roughly 3,300 elementary schools in Ohio, Fort Meigs was one of 8 that received 5 stars in all the state categories. So we're very excited and certainly want to provide a shout out for Fort Meigs and their staff for that achievement. So this idea of giving back is something that is not only a one-day kind of event, but we want it to become part of our DNA in Perrysburg, and I really think that it has. And for the Pass It On Challenge with Channel 13, we were victorious at our last game in terms of getting donated goods to the Goodwill. And we have our dance team that kind of coordinated and made it a kind of a kickoff event for all that they do. So this week is the homecoming for Perrysburg High School, so that's a very important time for our students and high school community. Just a picture of our homecoming court that'll be recognized at the game and voted on by their peers. So we're pretty excited about that. Part of the thing that we'll be talking a little bit about is later on in the presentation is the funding and what goes into school funding and just kind of a did you know House Bill 920, which was passed in 1976, changed how millage and school taxes are collected in Ohio. And prior to that, we knew that there was an experience where if there was a 4 mil levy that was on the books for a school district, it would collect 4 mils on that home value. When that home value would increase or there would be more homes or businesses that were brought into the community, prior to 1976. 4 mills would be applied to all of those new homes and businesses, and the district collected those funds. Prior to 1976, anytime there would be those increases in the community, the amount the district would collect would rise, and on those voted millage. So districts didn't have to go to the voters very often. But in 1976, there was a thing called stagflation. Wages were stagnant, inflation was rising, and in Ohio they were very concerned about home values increasing, and then the taxes for local government staying fixed, and then people not being able to keep up. So one of the things that began to happen was the legislature got together and said, we need to put in a circuit breaker. So they passed House Bill 920. And so what that did is it changed this piece where when 4 mills goes on the ballot, it collects a specific dollar amount. And then as more homes come into the community, as more businesses come into the community, the school district can only collect those voted mills, the amount that those voted mills generated. And so you see something that took place called effective mills, and those mills then began to become reduced. So it's like a bathtub. You can only fit so much water in a bathtub. With this law, the district can only collect the dollars that were approved by the voters. So you see that millage rate actually fall. So this is something that is unique to Ohio. Since 1976, there's been over 11,000 school levies in Ohio, because the only way that schools can keep up with inflation and other costs is to address that. So, but congrats to the Assistant Principal of the Year nominees. We're very proud Mr. Dave DeColius is one of the nominees, so we're excited and rooting for him and of all the assistant principals across the state for high schools and junior highs. It's quite an honor to have him here. Last month we recognized the track team, and I know there was some girls track team qualifiers for states. I know they talked about cross country and the team this fall, and how they're doing, but just thought we would remind folks about on September 27th, Culver's of Perrysburg, a little opportunity to donate in a fun way. Getting back to the funding piece, this kind of goes to do you know that in the state of Ohio, 42% of every dollar that comes into a school district comes from the state. 37% comes from the state, 42% comes locally. In Perrysburg, we have 68% comes locally and 20% from the state. The reason being is the state looks at property values, the amount of valuation, the number of homes, their worth, the number of businesses, and then it also factors in residents' income. And based on that, it determines how much state support should actually arrive at that school district. So the more valuation you have, the more businesses and the more your residents earn, the less the state feels obligated to provide funds to that local school district. So you can kind of see how that breaks down for Perrysburg. This is really cool. We had our first inclusive playground that has been installed and is up and running at Woodland Elementary. So this, as you can see here, just from the picture, you see that there are ramps and other types of pieces of the playground, which makes it easy for students in a variety of situations, wheelchair walkers or otherwise, to be able to enjoy playgrounds with their peers. So that's something that I know that through operations, Mr. Mapus has been keeping us updated. So we wanted to move a little bit into a quiz, because I know this is school, we're getting into October, and we're getting into midterm reports and quarter grades coming up. So these are related to the bond issue. So question number 1, the November 2014 HPI 2.95 mil bond issue was approved by voters. I'm very grateful for that. How many mills does the HPI bond issue levy on homes today? So we just talked about House Bill 920 and how that works. So that was 9 years ago. So anybody would like to take a guess here?
1.5.
C.
C? Okay.
C.
Correct answer is C. So as I mentioned, in November 4th, 2014, there was a bond issue was passed, and it collected a specific dollar amount. And just very similar, a bond issue calculates how much the payments are that the school community has to make towards that bond issue. So it's almost like a mortgage where this is your monthly payment. But the annual payment is generated there. So as the school community continues to grow, and as more people move in, businesses expand or enter Perrysburg, the less everybody has to pay because we have to pay that we have to make that payment. So more people, more businesses, everybody pays less. So in the last 9 years, we've seen, it was first on a $250,000 home, it was a $21.46 increase. Today, it's decreased almost 51%, and it's 1.5 mils. So on that $250,000 house, it is $10.94 a month. So it's a decrease. So question number 2, the ODE CUP report calculates what it costs to educate a student on a per pupil basis. Last year, the state average was $14,685.85. Which of the following is true regarding Perrysburg Schools' expenditure per pupil? So A, minus $1,700, B, plus $321, minus $821, or D, plus $1,043?
A. Go with A.
All right. So ODE tracks all of our expenditures. So when Randy talks later about his report and the money that we're spending to educate students, it gets categorized into different areas, and then the state tracks it, and then it also puts together a state average. And you can see here that since 2017 and actually beyond 2017, but we have been below the state average with $1,700.49 and 82, or $1,700.49 and 82 cents. So that is significantly below. So when you think about 5,800 students and multiply that by $1,700 per student that we're below, that's a significant amount of money that we're spending below the state average. We talked a little bit about this, where the source of funds and where they come from. And not only in terms of being thoughtful about what we're spending, we're also thoughtful about trying to help ourselves, and we have a development office that has been raising over $7.4 million since its inception, and now 4 consecutive years that we've ended the year in the black, so more revenue than expenditures. So that's certainly good signs for us in terms of financial stewardship. Perrysburg Schools has been approved to participate in the Ohio Facility Construction Commission OFCC ELP program with the upcoming bond issue. Under this plan, Perrysburg Schools is eligible to receive the following: 10% up to $14 million, 99% up to $138 million, 17% up to $23.8 million, or 30% up to $42 million.
If we answer B, does that make it happen? It's probably
Right.
more than B.
That's wishful thinking. That would be lovely.
Yeah,
D.
that would be optimistic, but so the answer is D. So with the program, we've applied, we've been accepted, and if the bond issue is successful in November, we will receive 30% reimbursement of all the OFCC approved projects, which would mean up to $42 million coming back to the district when the district's number in that OFCC program is called. So that's something that I think is a pretty important feature with this particular bond issue. Question number 4, was the community involved in shaping the November 7th, 2023 bond issue? Yes, board presentations were made and the community had opportunity to offer feedback. Yes, more than 50 community members and 20 staff members worked on it. Yes, for 14 months, groups of the community members worked on shaping the recommendation. D, yes, community members went to 3 different field trips to review Perrysburg Schools facilities and a new elementary school in Point Place.
E.
So it's A, B, C, and D.
Should be all the above.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the board said is we're facing these kind of pressure points of, growing elementaries, the enrollment at the high school exceeding the building capacity, and also aging facilities. We understand that the board said, let's get some community voices here to study this and come up with recommendations. So 3 subcommittees, 14 months, field trips, getting on the yellow bus to get to some of those locations. We had a great community effort, and where everything was on the table and considered. So, question number 5: what's happening with student achievement in Perrysburg schools? Perrysburg schools has a changing student population, and despite slight declines in many areas, it continues to work hard to serve students. The state report card places Perrysburg near the state average in most categories. The state report card does not tell, cards do not tell the whole story on student achievement in Perrysburg. Perrysburg Schools has data that shows it continues to improve and lead in a variety of areas, from the state report card to AP courses to elementary reading. D, it's complicated. Some achievement data is good, some bad, and others are just ugly.
This is a trick question. Schwartzmiller may answer this one a little bit different, being so competitive. He may say D. I'm going to say C.
I say C.
C. I see.
C.
All right, well, the answer is C. So we just talked about the state report card and how the district has fared, and we'll do a deeper dive into that. But also, I think it's important, whether we were 5 stars or 3 stars, I think we would say the same thing with sincerity, that it captures one piece of what we do here and the experiences that our students have and preparing them for their future. One of the things that the results that are not on the state report card is AP testing. And this is a slide, if you take a look at the far right, we've had 288 students last school year take AP courses. And the number of exams is 539. And we've had 3 or better is really the indication of getting college credit for families. We had 86% receive 3 or greater, which is really impressive. Looking at area school districts and private schools and public schools, you'll see that the number of finalists for the National Merit Program, 2023 combined, we continue to lead public schools and certainly among the highest performing of all the schools. And you can take a look at many of our private schools and add them up together, and they're still not where we are in terms of success. And certainly, the public schools, we continue to maintain, a healthy number against them. So beyond the elementary expansions, what type of work is planned at Fort Meigs, Toth, and at Woodland and the junior high? So essential infrastructure improvements, deferred maintenance, planned upgrades, and necessary improvements. This is another trick question. So A, B, C, and D, that's all of them. So when you think about the things that have to happen, we have 3 elementaries and we're adding new sections and expanding those buildings for new students. So when you begin to touch an old building, there's a couple things that have to happen. So one, when you're opening it up, you have to make sure that there is ADA compliance in all those spaces. So that's one thing that happens. So when we talk about deferred maintenance, that's something that we would be addressing. We talk about plumbing and electrical and boilers and all those kinds of things. Those are going to need to be upgraded so that as the new section comes on, the old section is there and functioning with a great deal of efficiency. And also, as students move through the building, they're experiencing that same kind of educational environment. So when we talk about deferred maintenance, it is really talking about that essential upgrades that need to happen to those buildings. So roofs and boilers, and we do a great job of chipping away at those. But when you're adding a significant wing or addition to those buildings, it takes more than what we're currently doing to tie in that old building to the new building. So true or false, 47% of this bond issue will go towards new classrooms and essential infrastructure improvements in the school buildings. 47% going to classrooms, new classrooms, and that essential infrastructure. True or false?
False.
All right, false.
Yeah.
So 96% of this particular bond issue is going directly to the classroom. 66% of every dollar that is going to be spent is going towards new classrooms. And again, that essential infrastructure improvements, that deferred maintenance piece is 30%. So this is something that is meaningful to our existing buildings and really getting to that magic number of 105 classrooms and to meet our needs to get us to 2040. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about transportation update. And I thought we would, first of all, begin with a huge thank you to our bus drivers, our transportation staff, including our mechanics, secretaries, our transportation administrator. It is an ever-changing job on a day-to-day basis, so we're very grateful for all their dedication. So right now we have 35 routed drivers. We have 7 unfilled positions, which I think is very important to keep in mind throughout this conversation. 2 mechanics. They service about 50 school buses and vans. And we have 1 secretary and 2 dispatchers because we have morning. It's a job where at 6 a.m. the dispatcher begins to work, and at 4:30 they're still on the job. So those 2 dispatchers split part of the day. We get approximately $1.1 million of state transportation funding, so that's about $6,000 a day. And that's not nearly enough for us in terms of our operations. We drive 2,861 miles every single day. So that's going to the Florida Everglades and back. That's what happens every single day in Perrysburg schools. To kind of look at a deeper dive, we have 14 routes that were dedicated to the high school. We do have a special needs route, which transports students who are on IEPs and need specific attention with transportation. We have 15 routes for the junior high school and Hall Prairie. The elementaries have respectively 4, 5, 4, and 6 routes that serve their students. We have 3 private school charter school routes, and we partner with Rossford to maximize both school districts in taking students out of the district. We have 1 out-of-district special needs route that services a student who needs to go outside the district, unfortunately, to receive support. We have 4 van routes for students that are going out of the district. And then we have 2 St. Rose routes that are dedicated to St. Rose Elementary here in Perrysburg schools. And then we have 9 midday routes. So those are the kindergarten students, CBI and Penna, which are geared towards high school students. And then, of course, preschool, which runs a half-a-day program. So in the last 2 years, we've added 2 elementary runs at Fort Meigs, 2 elementary runs at Frank, 1 at Toth, and 3 at Woodland. So we've seen an increase in the number of riders that are needing to be bused into our buildings. We've added 1 additional special education route that takes a student out of the district. Our district charter and private school ridership and payment in lieu, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. We have a new requirement to notify those schools and parents, so we've seen an uptick in those requests. And then the expanded YMCA programs, it was just in one of our buildings, now they're at all of our one of our elementaries, now they're at all 4, and that has reduced some of the shuttles. The other thing that also happens, and this is just a small, probably incomplete snapshot of trips that are happening every single day besides all the things that I've just talked about. And these are your trips. So these are just kind of the fall trips and the number of buses that need to go when those trips happen. So when we talk about homecoming and football season and meets that are taking place, we have to align buses to go after school and even on the weekends to transport our students. And you can see the number of buses that are in play. So when we were away last week, Friday, with the football team in Oregon, We know that we need to have 9 buses that are in play to transport our football team and marching band. It's good news and bad news. You know, when you look at cross country, this past week at Ottawa Park, we had two buses there for our varsity programs and the high school programs, 3 for our junior high programs. And you can take a look at the number. A lot of our subs, and if you remember on the previous slide, we have 10 transportation subs. A lot of them don't want daily routes. Either they work other jobs and want to pick and choose when they want to work, or don't like the stress of a daily route where you're driving up and down streets and picking up students. So a lot of these are done by our substitutes. So, you know, if we were to say we're not going to bus to cross country, that doesn't necessarily mean that driver would pick up that route for those high school students, because these drivers that typically sub and do these routes can only do them when they can. We have a few firefighters, a few others that have other jobs who will drive for us. So we're grateful for them to do that, but they can't commit to that day in and day out route. So you can see that it is a lot to manage on a daily basis.
Well, I think your presentation used to say to Walt Disney World in Orlando
Yeah,
and back,
so,
and now
yes.
you've pushed it out to the Everglades. So
We'll have to head
illustratedly, but
west
it's-
or east or
Running out of
something.
Florida.
Right. So we want to thank our drivers and staff members and who safely transport to the Everglades and back, to your point. So a couple of rules, and we'll get into why we're spending a little bit of time on this. So in Ohio, there is a 2-mile rule that anybody in grades K through 8, if they live within 2 miles of the school, the district may choose to not provide transportation to them. Our routes, we don't have any areas that are 2 miles in Perrysburg where students have to walk 2 miles. Although some of the students may claim that they walk 2 miles every day, they don't. In fact, I don't think we have probably many that are over a mile, and part of that is, I know Courtney and her team do a great job, Courtney, our transportation director, of evaluating those walk areas. And we have some pretty busy intersections that students would have to transfer to navigate if we were to bump that out to 2 years. We certainly don't want students walking under the junior high students, for example, or students at Toth walking under 75 every morning to get to school. So we make conscious decisions that even though it's within those 2 miles, for us to safely transport students, we know we're going to need to go and bring a bus to where the students are. For transportation 9 through 12, it is not required by the state to provide high school busing. We do it because not providing it sometimes creates a barrier for students who can't make it to school. Not everybody in Perrysburg has a high school student with a driver's license or a car, or parents that have the ability to get students there. So we're very conscious about that important role for some of those students, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We do have to bus students to Penta, that's required. And any private or public school within a 30-minute radius of their home, we do have to provide transportation to that, or payment in lieu, and we'll talk a little bit about that. A few years ago, the legislature passed House Bill 110, and what it said is that public schools have to provide transportation to community or non-public schools when they're open, regardless of whether or not we're open or not. So if we are providing transportation to a private school, and like a few years ago, we had one call and say, hey, we're moving up our start date 2 weeks before you guys start, we have to scramble, find drivers, and provide transportation for those students, because it's the law. They did add a portion of this, the 30-minute window rule. So when we do this to all those private and charter schools in the area, we do have to deliver them and pick them up within a 30-minute window. So you can see the language there from the revised code. Also with that bill, the ODE created a way that they were going to monitor compliance to make sure that we were doing our jobs with delivering these students. And you can take a look at what that looked like. And ODE in the language, and we'll talk about the lawsuits that have come from this, consistent and prolonged periods of non-compliance is something that they define as being subject to, school districts could be subject to a fine. So what's begun to happen last year, this year, is across the state, busing is become a major problem, not only for Ohio, but across the nation. Individuals with CDCs have a specific skill and can drive for Amazon or FedEx or UPS. And we're trying to attract and retain drivers who are doing this as well. And we've had other states where school districts have had to close because they didn't have enough drivers to successfully bring students to and from school. In Northeast Ohio, we saw that schools are desperate to find drivers. 88% of respondents in that survey in 2022 said, yeah, school districts are struggling to have vacant. With the law that has been passed in terms of challenging private school busing, we know that some folks in Sylvania sued the school district, and that made its way into federal court. And also, this article here in School Transportation News, Kettering said that the paragraph there at the bottom talks about in Westerville that non-compliance could mean, up to, for 10 days, $52,000 being withheld in transportation funding for their district. The House Bill 33 that was just signed into law this past summer changed the 10-day period to 5 days. So the state has shrunk down that compliance issue. So instead of last year trying to not have those prolonged and consistent situations be 10 days or more, now it's 5. So that is a challenge. So this year we did have the beginning of the school year, we had routes set up. We were, had 14 buses dedicated to high school transportation. 7 of those buses were coming approximately 30 minutes late after they were, doing their junior high HPI runs, picking up students, and those students were on the bus for a pretty short time, but they did have to wait. We hired a monitor to have study tables for those students. So once the bus arrived, they weren't on there generally very long, and they were getting home. But there was a complaints made to ODE, and we were made aware of those. And the law does say that you can't file a complaint within the first weeks of school because transportation is very fluid on the first weeks of school, as you know. So we had time to make adjustments, otherwise we would stand to lose a portion of our funding. And so, so those 7 buses, and again, we have 7 vacancies, and that's where you begin to feel it. So we're busing all of our students, we're getting them where they need to go, but it's not the way that we would intend to do it or as efficient. So, so what ended up happening is facing a fine. In 10 days, it would be $60,000 or more for us. For the rest of the year, you can begin to calculate, and that would put us close to $1 million being withheld in that fine. But we had 14 routes, 7 were 30 minutes late or thereabouts. And so what we ended up having to do is combine those 7 routes with the existing 7 routes that were picking up students within that 30-minute radius or window. So that essentially doubled the number of riders, which have made the buses very full. And it also has, in some cases, doubled the amount of time the students are physically on the bus. So that's, so that's certainly a challenge for us. So I mentioned the non-public students we do bus. That is a unique to Ohio law. And so when you think about this private and charter schools, which are public schools within 30 minutes of Perrysburg, that they could be eligible, here's a map of all the schools that potentially we would have to deliver students to. So you can see that it is physically impossible for us to not only provide transportation for our students, but also to students that would be attending at all those schools. So what we do is we declare transportation as being impractical, that we just can't get, even though it's within that 30 minutes, outside the district, we just can't get there. And there's a process that we have to do that. There is a process that we have to follow if there is a dispute. One of the interesting things, if we don't have a bus or a route to take students to that school, they can file a complaint with the state through their new program. And we then have to, while the dispute makes its way through ODE, we do have to provide transportation, which if we could provide transportation in the first place, we would. And, you know, to our residents, that's important, and we understand that. So it is really kind of interesting to see how that works. So when a family is declared impractical, the minimum and maximum amount that districts can pay is listed there. And, you know, on the agenda, we do have, you know, families that do legally, you know, put in for that and are accepted to receive that. The other thing that we do, that we've done to help with families, is we have alternative transportation practice. So, and that we're one of the few districts that do that, and we've been able to serve our families at the level that they've come to expect, and we're grateful to do that. But wanted to share a little bit about that. So how that works is, the example is the best way to explain it. Student A on Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday is to be dropped off at you know, address number 1. And then on Thursday and Friday and Tuesdays and Thursdays and every other Friday, that student is to be dropped off at address number 2. And we've been able to do that, whether it's a family with joint custody, or grandparents or daycare. We've always been able to do that. And as we've really felt the pressure of, you know, growth and the lack of, you know, new drivers, we have approximately 200 students right now that are on an alternative transportation plan, and we're delivering to 143 different addresses for those students. The challenge for us is that we have to hold a seat for that student on both buses, even though their days are alternating. And it also puts a lot of pressure on our staff as those numbers have increased with alternative plans. Our numbers have increased, and staff have to manage that at the school, making sure at the end of the day the students are getting on the right bus, having the transportation, the driver, coordinating and communicating and saying, okay, you know, this kindergartner, first grader, yes, this is the day we're taking them here, because often it's different buses. So what we've done is right now we have 4 drivers in the pipeline. So once hired, the first thing that we will do is we'll apply those drivers to the new high school routes to try to alleviate the situation that we have there. We also monitor our you know, our drivers and how much they're earning, so that we're competitive. And you know, we're among the highest in the area, so that is a good thing. And we're grateful for the board and their support in this area. We've offered referral bonuses. So if you work in the kitchen and in the cafeteria, and you know, you're able to get your son or daughter or husband or spouse to drive, you can receive a bonus for that referral. We've also done that with our own staff members. So we have had some teachers that have gotten their CDLs and have driven for us. The other thing is we've been very aggressive with where we're advertising and how we're advertising. And if you're on social media, you might have seen some of those ads. And that has helped contribute interest in not only in driving, but other positions that are hard to fill. The CDL training, just to kind of walk you through that, it takes 4 to 5 weeks to be trained by one of our drivers. We provide that training for free. And we have a vested interest in getting those people that are in the pipeline across. Do we get everybody who comes into the district as a prospective driver? We don't. Some of them get into it and say, that's not my, it's a lot of stress. You know, 60, 70 students behind you. That's a lot of pressure. And so we have some that will kind of say, nope, not for me. It takes 4 to 5 weeks. That training, if you went elsewhere to get a CDL training, could be as much as $10,000. But there is kind of a bottleneck because of the industry and the demands. We know that they have to complete their training with us before they can even call to schedule, like their driving test. To be a bus driver, they have to take a driving test, like some of our students who are learning to drive. And they're telling us that it's 6 to 8 weeks backlog to even sit for the test.
Wow.
So at best, when somebody enters our pipeline, it's 10 weeks to get there. You know, the meanwhile, you know, their private industry is, you know, feeling this pressure, and we know that, you know, listening, you know, we're not the only ones on social media looking for bus drivers. They sometimes can dig a little deeper than what we can do. So it's a daunting task, and there's a few times where when we get desperate, and there was not long ago where the dispatchers that we mentioned earlier have their CDLs, and we had to pull them to drive routes. The 2 mechanics have their CDLs. We had to pull them to drive routes. And on one particular day, we had one person left in the office, and that was Ms. Parr, our transportation director. In a bus, you know, a car was parked illegally, a bus clipped it, and we had to send another bus to pick up, you know, those students, and we had to transport that driver per the federal rules with, you know, CDLs to be tested anytime there's a bus, you know, accident, even minor ones. And there was nobody physically in the transportation department that we could reach out to. Luckily, there was a driver that they were able to call and reach who was close by, who was able to get to the department and run a bus up there and continue. So it's a challenge, and you know, we thought we had a pretty good system in place with the study tables and having supervised folks there at the building. But the laws are the law, and we have to comply. And we know there's a lot of parents that are really unhappy with these changes, and we are too. But you know, this is a challenge for us. So looking ahead, we know that the district enrollment continues to grow, especially at the elementary level. We saw the additional routes over the last 2 years. There's a certain uncertainty. There's an uncertainty of ridership, and what that means is from week to week, or as athletic seasons end and start, we'll see the number of riders change. You know, all those 3 bus loads of cross-country runners might not be going out for basketball, so they're going to be on the buses heading home after school. So we know that that's coming, and that could be a 20 to 30% increase in riders. So we're beginning to plan what to do. Changes with 2-hour delays, you know, sports seasons, that creates havoc because you can't always rely on those subs and others that we do. Retaining staff members in a time where, you know, driver shaming is kind of taking place, where there's people who are frustrated with different situations, whether they're drivers or families, you know, getting after drivers, and that creates a lot of stress. And drivers, a lot of the drivers we have don't have to drive. We rely heavily on retired drivers who are doing this. They like the work, the extra money is nice, but they don't have to drive. And so we're worried about making sure that we have an environment where they feel safe and able to complete those. The competition with the private sector is real. And we also, and I don't get this, but we have more high school students that are not getting their license out of the gate. So that we've seen an uptick of those students who aren't driving. So other districts have kind of taken some different steps, and I'm not saying to suggest this, but one is to hire third-party contractors. Frankly, not something that I'm necessarily excited about. One, there's not many, you know, contractors that are out here operating in Northwest Ohio, and when you do that, you lose control over who your drivers are. We're very fortunate to have dedicated drivers that know their students' names and know their families and are very involved. And you know, when you're bringing in an outside contractor, you lose some of that, and that's something to consider. Some districts have eliminated high school busing, and when with COVID and the challenges that we had with busing, we know for a while we didn't have high school busing. We knew that created real attendance issues for families that struggle the most, and that certainly is an equity issue for many folks. More traffic on the roads, we don't need that. And then some districts have adjusted high school busing where we'll do 9th grade only or 10th grade only. And also, when we eliminated those routes, it also cut drivers' salary. Those 7 routes that we talked about this year, that they were coming back, picking up those. In some cases, that cut some of the drivers' salaries because they got less hours. And I worry about that because, now they're, some had their days added, and some who couldn't physically be back saw a loss of time, and so I worry about that. So kind of a broad update for this month, but and certainly, and Ms. Parr is here and certainly could answer any direct questions, and certainly she's welcome if she'd like to share any additional things as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hostler on the presentation?
A lot of information, Mr. Hostler. My biggest concern is looking at this 45 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes because of a complaint, which ODE has a set policy. ODE doesn't make any adjustments or changes based upon this common sense, an hour and 45 minutes. I mean, that's to me, is hour and 20 minutes to be on a bus. Do they listen? I mean. So
ODE they are the ones that have to enforce it. The state legislatures are the ones that actually put that into motion. So ODE is the compliance leg, okay. But the state legislature, the governor, the 5 additional days, if I'm not mistaken, was put into the budget bill. So there was no hearing or any additional things. It just kind of popped in, in the middle of June in negotiations.
It's discouraging to hear that. It was particularly when they can't get the mapping correct. They do it 4, 5, 6 times. They get all these chances to get it right. Yep. The school districts are sitting back here with this situation here. How many students do we have riding for an hour and 45 or hour and 20 minutes? Is there more than a dozen, or?
I believe. I think that's probably towards the tail end of the number of students. So I don't know if Ms. Parr, if you want to weigh in on that question. Yeah, so that's kind of the range. So
we put a tutor on a bus for them to work on homework or help with. I mean, that is really sad that happens because of one complaint, or 1 or 2 complaints. I mean, I understand the complaint, but I don't think it's common sense. Although you're doing everything you can do as a superintendent, and Courtney is a bus transportation. By the way, I don't know how you keep things straight with all this. This is crazy. It's like playing Tetris.
So is that more like an issue if you live on the west side of town, or like HBI, west side of town, and you live on the east side of town? Is that more like the length of time issue?
Yeah, it depended on the routes that we just had to kind of push together. We were looking at, we were like, we were within days of kind of deciding for that. So it was a matter of just putting it into motion and saying, okay, so this is what we're going to do. You're going to cover this area after you are already finished with your high school route.
I think one of the things to keep in mind is that students who live further out have longer bus rides, but now those bus rides have gotten increasingly longer because there's maybe a dozen or 2 students that are getting off before that student. Before, we tried to do a more direct route, getting the students out to that area. Now we can't because that bus is stopping and winding through neighborhoods on their way out to that far location. So yeah, there's always been, in a normal year, I'm trying to remember what that looked like. I don't think we had students out more than an hour on a bus, those far students, but now because of what we've had to do with combining routes, that pushes those students out even further.
Sure.
Yeah. Mr. Pullman, I agree with kind of your frustration in looking at ODE/the legislature on this issue. I know the governor is taking a look at, has put together a task force about bus safety, and I commend him for that. That's great. I hope there's a realization, kind of a step back of the forest for the trees, right, to realize that things like House Bill 110, alternative transportation, the need to bus kids to parochial and private schools as well, all of that kind of adds up to put Ms. Parr and our bus drivers and the community into the position that it's in. And you know, I am looking for alternatives, and I'm looking over at Ms. Larimer, our legislative expert over there, and we're at Capitol Conference in a few weeks, and you know, I'm looking for those avenues where we can start to tell this story and the impact that it's having on the streets in our community, and how it's impacting our kids. Another thing that this board, in my opinion, can do, well, it goes without saying, is continue to thank everybody involved with transportation in this district, from Ms. Parr to our dispatchers to you know, most certainly our bus drivers. I had a friend that drove a bus. It's been a couple of years now, but he used to love the job, and he said that it was, you know, he was the first face that these kids saw in the morning and the last face these kids saw in the afternoon. And you know, it really, for a lot of these kids, has that impact. And, you know, not just to mention getting our kids back and forth to the buildings safely so that they can be educated. So it's so important. There are so many. It's like a knot. It's a rope tied up in knots right now, and we've got to find ways to untie that knot, because Perrysburg's growing, and a lot of these, I'm back on the legislature's rules, were set up when communities looked differently, when we weren't busing to the Everglades and back, when we only had maybe one or two parochial schools in the neighborhoods that we had to provide transportation for. So I think it's something that we and boards in Ohio have to kind of take up and start to work through with the legislature.
I agree.
Right, I agree with you.
Yeah, definitely.
I find it sad that they would rather react and fine school districts versus give the school districts money to be proactive, to hire drivers, raise pay, you know, find ways to think outside the box regarding transportation. You know, oh, that's great, look what you're doing. Instead, they'd rather just fine you because they don't understand and slipped it into a bill that nobody knew it was into a budget bill. What does that have to do? Bus drivers have to do, you know, with House Bill 33.
Yep.
Is there anything, I'm just looking at those 20 or less students are on the bus for an hour and 20 minutes. Is there anything we can do with that pool of students? Are they on the same bus? Are they all spread out? Okay. I just can't imagine that time frame.
One kid could get home sooner.
So what's the next steps then? Obviously, you showed a couple different options. Is it something that you're discussing actively and then going to come back and make suggestions to the board as what to do?
Right now, we have 40 drivers that are in training. So as soon as we get them pushed out and through, we would get them contracted and just set on high school route.
And Courtney, correct me, we cannot change.
Anything this year?
We can't change in the middle of the year. So
Right,
if
I
we
knew
said,
that. That's why I was asking, what's the next steps? Is it like?
so
you
we're
just-
stuck. I mean, if we were saying no high school busing, we
No, I
can't
knew
do
that.
that. We
Yep,
could have
yep.
done that before the year started. Once you start,
Right.
you got to continue with it.
I think
Well, I
the
mean,
date
the
is
question is,
actually
as we get to
October. It's
continue to
after
grow.
count week, so, which is coming up. So we can change up until count week, and then once we do count week, then we can't change the existing. If we do, we have to go to a hearing with ODE and ask their permission, if I'm not mistaken. So,
Well, we could add more, like you
Yes.
say, we've
Yeah,
got
you
40.
can't.
Do we have 4 buses for them to drive?
Yeah, it does. I've always been under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not the vehicles that are the issue. It is the
people.
drivers. It is getting people to drive those buses.
That's retaining our 7.
Yeah.
I mean, laying it out this way, it's not like we can come up with a different plan that is somehow, I mean, short of doing what some other districts have done, there is not going to be a way to, without physically getting more drivers. We've gotten to the last few years, we've done all that we can. We've moved the chairs on the deck around as much as we can. And we're just, that's why we're spending some time on this evening, is there isn't anything else we can do. We're there.
So it's more of a awareness rather than like an action. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
That's
It
what I
is
needed to understand.
Also acting, and we've said it, it's frustrating. There's frustration out there, and you get it, but I was also talking to somebody who just started driving for busing. She switched over from a different district to Perrysburg, and she said, it's just a great district to be in. The kids and the families, and we want that to remain true as well, so that our drivers can focus on driving and can focus on safety rather than kind of some of the other behaviors that you see out there in the media.
Yeah, I just got to get over that hour and 20 minutes. That's just
You're really-
beyond me.
yeah.
It's just,
Well, it's been a few years since I've had to
Yeah.
ride a school bus, just
Really?
a few. But most of my bus driving years were done when I lived in California. An hour and 20 minutes was a normal ride for me, just because we lived so far away from my school. But to remember the importance of those drivers, my elementary and beginning junior high bus driver was Mrs. Degnan, and my junior high bus driver for the rest of it was Mr. Desmond. I still remember them. If they walked in the room, I would recognize them. The bus drivers are so important to our kids. When you say that they're the first face you see and the last face you see, yeah, that's a nice vision, but for me, they were really important. A lot of times they set my mood for the day because the morning started out badly, or they helped fix the day when I had a rough day and I knew I was going home to a rough situation or whatever. They were just so important to me. Loved them to death. I just think this is a sad commentary on our legislature. And I think you put it really well, Lori, that they react instead of proact. And if there's, write to Haraz and to Teresa, let them know, hey, y'all, thanks, but you really missed the mark on this one.
Again.
And it's not just us. It's not just Perrysburg. It's all the other 600 districts in the state that this affects. So
I kind of wish that people would be a little bit more understanding too when you have complaints. I mean, we've got a lot of things going on in this district. With traffic is one of them. So even if you were on schedule, the traffic is just crazy around Perrysburg anymore. But all this, one or two complaints that took place, all this changed to follow procedure. I get that, but and then people criticizing bus drivers as they had in the very first day. We heard about that. So anyway, yeah, thanks for all you doing, the bus drivers, what they're doing, and Courtney, Mr. Hostler. I didn't go an hour and 20 minutes on a bus. I took the TARTA, or whatever it was called back then, paid my 25 cents. Anyway, so that just floors me when I see that amount of time. And Mr. Drury says that some districts are over 2 hours on a bus. So I guess that's what's new to me. But I guess what's new to these 20 students is it used to be 25 to 30 minutes. Now it's between 45 minutes, an hour, and 20 minutes. So, thanks, Mr. Hostler.
Well, to add, since we're all sharing stories about back in the day, I was jealous I never got to ride a bus, because growing up here in Perrysburg, Woodland Elementary, growing up in town, I should say, Woodland Elementary, the junior high and the high school, I was always a walker. So to your comment, Eric, like gone are the days where that was what it was, I never got to ride a bus. You don't have that anymore as, places expand. Certainly in some towns, but yeah, things change.
It takes me back to the time I was riding the bus then, and we got pulled over because we were being unruly, and we probably sat there for 15 minutes, and I got home and told my mother, and she said, "What did you do?"
I can't imagine, Eric.
What did you guys do? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hosser. And again, good discussion, and again, a lot of appreciation for the work that's being done there. And not lost in that presentation, too. Again, congratulations to the administration, the teachers, the staff, everybody involved in this school district for the outstanding state report card that we just received last week, 5 out of 5, and we look forward to hearing more about that from Mr. Swartzmiller next month. Okay, next item on our agenda is the financial report. Mr. Druyer.
I sat long enough.
I'm jealous, I want to switch too.
All right, happy August, 2 months into the year.
Welcome home.
Thank you. So we're going to have a slideshow about my trip to Iceland if you prefer, other than finances. But
Okay.
no, I won't subject to that yet. I almost did it for Finance Committee, but I said, no, that'd be kind of unprofessional, so we'll move on. Okay, so just to give you an update of general fund. We're 2 months into the new fiscal year, and we're tracking right on schedule. Key number is our true cash days at 155 days. And as you know, we've left our peak and we'll be drawing down our cash reserves until February and March when we get our next round of first half taxes. But we're looking good, right on track. A couple comments on this, since I'm going to piggyback on some of Mr. Hostler's comments on transportation. So our transportation dollars from the state show up in the unrestricted line. So like Mr. Hostler said, it's about $1.1 million. That includes, and it's based on head count and some reports that we run. There's also a little bit of money in there for special education transportation. It's not, so it's 1.1 million. Our total costs, direct costs for transportation is about 3 million. So we get about a third of our transportation costs covered through state funding at this point. So, and of course that's salaries, benefits, supplies, those kinds of things. The biggest portion of that being bus driver salaries are a little over $1 million. And that's being short of drivers. And so imagine if we had it fully covered, it'd be a little bit higher. But obviously, I think we really would prefer that. So anyway, we're right on track. I want to note salaries and benefits are a little bit below the 16.7% where we'd be, but that's expected because September is a big change month. This is where our teachers' contracts go into effect in September. So increases, step increases, changes in education, all that stuff happens in September. So you'll see a little bump up in September in our payrolls as a result. And of course, and as you know, certified staff is the biggest portion of our wages and benefits. Our cash flow, our cash balance, as you can see, are normal. We're in good shape, well above where we were before 2019 when we were facing fiscal emergency. So all good as expected. So just a couple quick observations. Our interest earnings continue to be very strong. Not good if you're borrowing, but certainly good if you're investing. We're seeing some earnings that's up to 5%, which is amazing on monies that are liquid, right? I can get those monies today if I need be. So that's really good. In fact, we had over $200,000 in earnings last month, which is about, maybe about what we got the first year I was here. So.
Wow.
Yeah, so our revenue's ahead of last year by 4.4%. Again, expenses are trending as expected, but new teachers' contracts, I mentioned, start September 1st, so we'll see a bump up on that. And of course, this is 5-year forecast time. We're starting to work on those numbers, and we'll probably have to talk about, we got a lot to talk about. We got to figure out when we're going to do all that, probably November work session, talk the 5-year forecast in detail. Hopefully we'll have a preview for the Finance Committee next month. To have some time to digest it and talk about it, because there's some major assumptions in there. And this 5-year forecast is probably going to be one of the most important ones, because from that we're going to have to make decisions about the levy that's expiring. We've got the bond issue, and next year at this time we have a levy we'll have to deal with. So I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked about this a couple of times. We're working on the logistics details. I don't think we're ready to unveil it yet, but know that we're looking at what's going to be the impact of next school year having tuition-free all-day kindergarten. And the school fair funding plan is what's allowing this to happen. So this is my forecast from May, and where this impacts us is in this line here, that's our state funding. You see the bump up, particularly in 26 and 27, and that's due to the implementation of fair funding formula and increased enrollment from all-day kindergarten, tuition-free all-day kindergarten. And as a reminder, what that means is if we charge tuition for kindergarten, we get funded for a half of a student, right? Even though we're educating a full student, we get funded for a half. When we go to tuition-free, we get funded for that full student. Well, that gives us more funding for those students, but just as importantly, it adds to our overall student count, reduces our wealth capacity, increases our state aid per student, for all students. So those kindergartners impact every student in the district. And so it becomes possible now because of the fair funding formula, and we're approaching getting fully funded and not being capped by those students. And then the downside is in this line. This is where our tuition for kindergarten shows up. And you're seeing a drop of about $1 million. $750,000 of that is due to all-day kindergarten. The other amount is interest. I expect interest rates are going to drop, plus our cash reserves will drop. So being a little bit conservative there. That was in May. Obviously, we're reworking those numbers coming for the November forecast. So that's the impact of all-day kindergarten. And so next year, essentially, it's about a little bit better than a break even, but the following years, it's a win for everyone in the district to do that. And I think it's the right thing for our families, assuming that Ms. Price and Mr. Hostler can find a way to make it happen. And they are, right? I'm looking at, I see space an issue. The other thing to recognize, though, we still have to deal with, we don't know it until we know what we decide to do in terms of how many student counts and classroom size. There will maybe some staffing adjustments. We have to add a kindergarten teacher, add aides, those kind of things. So we got to build that in there. So there's some costs that may come in there too, but still the margin is such that I think it's a no-brainer.
Question, why does it go down from 26 to 27, from 15?
Good question, because the fair funding formula, it increases the base costs in the first year of the biennium. So in the first year of the biennium, you get the benefit of the increase in base costs. The next year, the base cost calculation doesn't go up, but our wealth capacity goes up, so we get less state funding per pupil.
So that would take effect 2027.
So you also notice in 24 to 25, in a way, our increase is not very much.
Right.
Our enrollment kind of offsets some of that base cost being flat. Okay? So that's if you will, that 2 years in the base cost is a big deal. We're budgeted for 2 years, but our costs are going up every year.
Right.
One of my favorite charts. We don't have the data yet from 23, all the report cards, but as soon as we have that, I'm going to update this. This is a student performance versus spending per pupil for districts in Wood and Lucas counties, and we are right there. There's only one district that outperformance in 2020, school year 22, and that was Ottawa Hills, and they're clearly outspend us per pupil. But we outperform everyone else with spending below the average for the area. That's not state average, that's the average for the area. So again, going back to the theme of Mr. Hostler's report, performance versus spending, I feel this shows that our students and our community are getting a good bang for their dollar investment. And by the way, I expect this to still look, we'll get the 2023 data as soon as we get all of it rolled up. Second thing here, and we've already hit on this a little bit, and one of the things great organizations do is they face the brutal facts, right? We know that our community plays a very significant, plays the role in funding our schools. We have good schools, we have community support, and it's being funded by our local taxpayers and our local homeowners. There's no doubt about it. Here's the revenue per pupil for, again, Wood and Lucas County students. And there we are. For this area, we have the second highest funding per pupil from local sources. That's income tax and property tax. Rossford is the only one that's ahead of us on this chart, and they're almost 50% commercial, right? So this tells you our burden is on our residential taxpayer. I think we have to face that, acknowledge that, and love them for their support. Conversely, on the state sources, we're down there, again, based on that wealth calculation. Ottawa Hills even receives more dollars per student from the state than we do. If that tells you anything, it's in that calculation. So this is not a tale of woe is me, it's just a tale of this is the reality. As we sell ourselves and sell the school, we do a lot of great things, but just recognize, where the burden is, and it's a reality. We got to appreciate that. A couple other things real quick. and I'll get off the soapbox. We just finished auxiliary services audit. What that means, we get, on a biennium basis, money from the state called auxiliary service funds that funnels to our non-publics that participate. And in our case right now, it's only St. Rose. So we get about $155,000 a year that we are the fiscal agent for, that St. Rose spends theoretically on our students. It's Perrysburg money that St. Rose can spend. It came from the state. Every 4 years, the state does a bench audit and say, hey, are you spending that money properly? Because there's restrictions on it. It's the one place where there's accountability on state money going to private schools, and it's here. We have to show that that money is only spent on K-12 education, and that money does not cross over any other church or Sunday school functions. That's really what it does. And we came through that audit flying colors. It's a good partnership with St. Rose. Kelly Wells handles that from our end, between Kelly and the folks at St. Rose. They do a good job of managing that. So it's a good team effort on that, and it's kind of one of those things you don't like to do, but it turns out pretty well, just another state doing their job. The last thing I want to mention tonight, you have on the agenda a resolution that allows to proceed with bids for Steinecker Stadium turf. I just want to mention it real quickly. That turf is approaching its end of its life. It's outlived what we expected. It's still obviously safe and functional, but it needs to be looking at. We're going to go ahead with the bid that's on it, and we're working on funding, private funding as best we can. Mr. Apke and Mr. Hostler, and I know we're talking, folks, we don't have a deal yet, but we will get, but we'll have to do some arrangements internally, probably to help that along, but have it funded over the period of time. So we're going to get it done way or another, and the best time to do it is now. It's the least expensive time and the least disruptive time, but the district may have to help out that until our fundraising reimburses us, or at least we have commitments to reimburse it. So I just want to give you that heads up. We want to be as transparent as possible, and I think we have some good leads to get it funded.
All of it?
All of it, but it may not be all at once.
No, but the hope is that all of it will be funded.
Yeah, the hope is to get all of it funded. But the other thing to recognize is if it's not funded, at some point in time, if you don't replace it, whether it's this year, next year, you can't use it. As long as, yeah.
It's also keep in mind, they also had a donation to the district for the current turf that's out there. So that came to the district, $500,000 from that insurance policy.
Yes. Well, that's that's true. That money has been spent.
Oh, yeah, that's true, but I mean, it's still, that current turf was basically also donations.
Yep.
The district, years 9 and 10, did loan help pay for that too, but.
And that turf was about $690,000 when originally put in. And we're talking about probably less than $500,000 to replace it. So. That's it.
I have a question though, real quick, about auxiliary services. I know what that is. Can you explain that a little bit more for general public? Like when you say it's Perrysburg kids serviced at St. Rose, like what kind of services do they receive that comes out of our budget?
What happens is there's a head count, the number of students who reside in Perrysburg. The state provides some funding per student. So that amount of money is funded on a biennium basis. It could be used, St. Rose uses it for a lot of special services they contract through ESC. It could be speech therapy. It could be Title I type services, anything to help those kids. It could be buying textbooks. There's a pretty wide range in what they could use for, but they have to demonstrate that it's being used for students in school and not for any other activities. For example, it's typically, even if you lock it up, buying construction paper is typically no, because if you have Sunday school in that classroom, how do you know that construction paper is not being used for Sunday school? Those kinds of things. So, but they spend it mostly on textbooks and some services to provide extra support to their students.
I think the amount, the last biennium budget was just over $900 per pupil is what the state provided for those services. And then there's administrative reimbursement too. So it's auxiliary services, administrative reimbursement. And so right around $900 per pupil from the state just for those things. So that's not related to the vouchers, which are being rolled out now. So
And we do take a 4% administrative fee out of that. So it's not zero, but we make sure we get our 4% to cover our administrative costs because all their purchases are through us. They use our purchase order system, and we manage the purchase orders and we manage the bills for those funds. So,
Thank you.
So as Mr. Drew works his way back here, we did have the Finance Committee meeting on last Friday where we also talked about the auxiliary audit, and as was Ms. Wells gave us a presentation, discussed the controls, enhanced controls that have been put in around the credit cards. And it just kind of points to, and on the back of the state audit that was done, the annual state audit that had no comments, just how important it is to have such strong controls, which this district does.
The checks and balances, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's a kudos to Randy and Kelly and their staff, and it's all very important, particularly as we're talking bond levies and things like that.
Yeah.
Anything else from the Finance Committee meeting, since we're on the topic?
Are we?
I think Mr. Drew pretty well covered it in his agenda.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
And then, like you said, just the credit card.
So with that, with Mr. Drew back in his seat, we have one item to approve in the that is item 7.1. So I'm looking for a motion on 7.2 to accept the September financial report.
So moved.
Ms. Larimer and Mrs. Eubank. Roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Dr. Refford,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. At this time, I'd like to request a 5-minute break. So we'll be in recess for 5 minutes. We'll swing the gavel at 7:05.
Thank you.
Okay, we are back in session. Thank you for that break. We are now at item 8.1, Board Committees and Discussions. And we will start with the Operations Committee, held on September 8th. Ms. Larimer?
All righty. The notes were really, really good. There were a couple of things that I wanted to point out to you, that the online menu is scheduled to be ready in October. One of the cool things about it is that it will have a link for our free and reduced applications, but also Pay Schools app will be there as well for parents to add money to their students' accounts, so that's really cool. Denise is getting great feedback from the students, and the number of lunches compared to last year has gone up between 50 and 100 lunches per building, so that's really awesome for her. And for Courtney, we got a lot of information about busing, but she's let us know that the app is up and running and they already have about 4,000 users, and that the GPS units will be installed this week, next week. So looking to roll it out around October 1st. Also one thing from Denise was she's developing a coffee shop at the high school, and she's calling it Jacket Java, which I think is really cool. And that should be opening in October. And she's also doing something called Taste It Tuesday, Try It Thursday, which I thought sounded like a blast because I'm one who doesn't try any new food. I will gladly eat the same thing day in and day out. But yeah, she's going to town on that. So that's between Tom's report and these great notes. There you go. That's operations in a nutshell.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't have anything to add on that. Thank you, Sue. Sure. Finance Committee, I think we've already addressed, but Ms. Eubank, anything else kind of come to mind?
Nothing else comes to mind. I think we went over everything.
Same. Curriculum Committee, Mr. Pullman?
Yes, we primarily spent time talking about the Resident Educators Program. And basically, it's going from 4 years to 2 years. So you can imagine Mr. Schwartzmiller and Kent having to go. There's people who've been in it for 3 years, and some have been in it for 4 years, or I'm sorry, 2 years, and the requirements change, so they're working on that. And Kent Van Dock's going to be the new person in charge. And so we spent time talking about the Wilson reading also, which is basically open for grades 5 through 12. So a lot of discussion on reading in the last couple of meetings.
Very good. Thank you. No Policy Committee, no Communications Committee is my understanding.
Correct.
So with that, I guess I'll just a real quick update. Things are in full swing over at Penta, and one of the exciting updates there is that they are over 5,000 students now going through that building. So much like we're seeing over here, that's another kind of record amount of enrollment, which is very exciting over there.
Are they able to handle that?
Well, you've probably seen out in the news. They are expanding facilities as best they can. Including the purchase of a facility out in Holland.
I saw that.
For really, that's going to be focused on adult ed in the future. But yeah, it's they've got growing pains over there as well.
Out where? What did you say? I'm sorry.
In the Holland area, Executive Parkway Drive is where they bought a building.
Okay.
Okay, that takes us. Any other committees that I may have missed or? Okay. That takes us to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is going to cover items 10 through 14 in the agenda. Confirming that. Okay, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved?
Ms. Larimer?
Second.
Dr. Ruffert? Roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, that takes us to item 15, board discussion of any new business. Are there any comments or discussions from the board members for the good of the group?
Be watching your email or snail mail for information about Capitol Conference that should be coming out. If you don't get anything by the middle of October, please let me know so that I can make sure it gets to you.
I'll probably also give a nod, too, to the homecoming festival that occurred over the weekend, and particularly the parade. I saw at one point the number of Perrysburg school organizations that were marching in the parade. Do I have the number right? Was it in excess of 40? Was it that? Tom's looking at me
40?
like, no.
40?
Okay, well, there were a lot of
There was a lot.
organizations. And also, a nice strong showing from the PEA as well to march in
Right.
for Perrysburg schools.
That's
So,
awesome.
And I said to Sue, I said, I was with Mr. Abke and the foundation, and we hadn't even taken off yet, and the marching band was already back. As how long it was, and it was just so nice to see so many people, and it was like, it was just a wonderful afternoon or a wonderful morning. The weather was perfect, and just to see so many people out to, just having a good time. It was nice to see, but I couldn't believe how I was like, where are these people coming from? There's so many people in the parade, but we have still so many people out on watching. It was great.
I'm so slow handing out candy and stuff. I think I might have been like 3 groups behind, so nobody knew who I was marching with on Saturday. But
Find it in the grass.
And Mr. Bennington, if I could talk about Capitol Conference for just a second.
please, yeah.
We have your room reservations. I'll be sending an email out shortly. Unfortunately, we're going to have to walk a little bit. We've been fortunate the last couple of years to be right across the street, but we're a little bit farther away. It's a tough battle out there, but
Gasp.
Okay.
but we got rooms for everyone, and I won't tell you where dinner is yet.
When's your contract up? That's a joke. Okay. Any other comments for the board?
I just want to say the parade, it was a great day, good turnout, and it was very nice to see everybody out.
Very good. Okay, next item, public participation. We do not have anyone signed up for public participation for this session. So a poorly timed break, I guess, because that takes us to adjournment. So that has never happened before. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved?
Ms. Larimer?
Second.
Dr. Reffert? Roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you.